Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to welcome you on this webinar on the future of universities and the impact on COVID on higher education. I'm welcoming you on behalf of our host. I'm a director of the Polish Academy of Sciences Scientific Center in Vienna. So I am right now in Vienna, but I represent Polish Academy of Sciences. And please let me say a few introductory words and also to introduce our distinguished panel today. And then I will hand over to my colleague, Marcin Kędzierski, who will be the moderator and the chairman of this discussion. So as mentioned, we are in different places, but in a way, this virtual platform is hosted by the Polish Academy of Sciences. We have office in Vienna. We also have our sister office in Rome, and we have several other foreign offices in Berlin, in Paris, in Brussels, and in Kiev. And we are launching this platform within a broader series of Polish-Austrian-Italian Trialogue. And I think this seminar is the first one. So I hope we will do a good beginning. The idea is to connect Poland, Austria, and Italy to discuss current issues of Europe, of constitutional law and education, different policy areas. And I think Poland, Austria, and Italy do not belong to any usual club other than European Union and some other organizations, but we are not partners of typical triangles or other smaller groups of countries. And I think it is a good idea to bring us together first, because it is not that often that those two countries would speak and discuss common problems. But also, I think all those countries have good track record of sometimes putting ourselves outside of the European mainstream. So we might bring some fresh ideas to the discussion of Europe. But our today's topic is much more universal than European affairs. It is a global problem, the problem of the future of universities and how COVID is likely to impact higher education also in a long run. I'm very happy to that Polish Academy of Sciences can host this seminar. Poland just implemented a new university reform, and here we have a nice Polish-Austrian link, because there was an international committee established to advise Poland on this. And since I was involved in this work, and the chairman of this international group was Professor Georg Winkler, so he helped us a lot with designing the new framework. He cannot be with us today, but we have prominent representatives of the Austrian higher education landscape. But we are very grateful to Professor Winkler for his assistance. Now, if you allow me, before I hand over to our moderator, I would like to briefly introduce our distinguished speakers today, and please let me do so in alphabetical order. So we have Professor Dobrochna Bach-Golecka of the University of Warsaw, of the Law Faculty. She was a Dean for Research and International Cooperation until actually this year. And she is also appointed an ad hoc judge at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. We have also Professor Roland Bernhard, who represents the University of Vienna, who is historian specialized in history and history of education. He holds doctorate from the University of Graz and habilitation from the University of Salzburg. He spent some time at the University of Oxford as postdoc visiting research fellow and project leader at the Department of Education. And now his response to the pandemic is that he established a YouTube channel called the Digitech Academy that produced many tutorials to address the problems that we are facing contemporarily. We also have Professor Heinz Engel, the current rector of the University of Vienna and former vice rector of the University of Vienna, who has long served in the university leadership. He is a mathematician, a professor of mathematics. He's a member of many learned societies, including Austrian Academy of Sciences. He is also a fellow of the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics, fellow of American Mathematical Society, and a member of Accademia Europea. And we have common friend Georg Winkler, right? a former rector of the university. We also have our Italian friend, Professor Luciano Sasso, vice rector of Sapienza University and president of UNICA. He is a professor at the Faculty of Pharmacy and Medicine. He has a long track record of coordinating high-level international research projects in the field of pharmacology, and he has also served for many years on boards of prestigious journals and also selection committee for prestigious international grants. Now, we also have our my colleague, Łukasz Szukowski, who is a key expert in Poland in the field of academic governance. He has published widely on the field of university management. He is a professor of the Jagiellonian University and also director of Clark University branch campus at the University of Social Sciences in Poland. And he has also hands-on experience with consultancy and management as the president of Public Consulting Group Poland. So very glad to have you here. And we also have Professor Grzegorz Wrochna, who is Deputy Minister of Science and Education in the Republic of Poland. So he is now responsible for the policy in higher education. As I mentioned before, we have brand new law that is now being implemented, and we are learning the first experiences. So we are extremely happy to have you here to listen what are the first experiences of the reform and what is the way forward. Professor Wrochna is a professor of physics with a notable track record also internationally. He worked at CERN, European Organization for Nuclear Research in Geneva, and since 2005 he is head of Astrophysical Apparatus Lab in the Andrei Soltan Institute of Nuclear Studies. He works also with the Polish Academy of Sciences Task Force for Power Industry and Polish Academy of Sciences Power Issues Committee. So very, very happy to have you here. And last but not least, we have our chairman, our moderator, who will ask us questions, Dr. Marcin Kędzierski, who combines experience of higher education and also recently pandemics. He writes for a broader audience also on those issues. He's assistant professor at the College of Economy and Public Administration at the Krakow University of Economics, and he's also chief expert at the Jagiellonian Club Center for Analysis, which is a influential think tank in Poland. He's also a columnist and influential public intellectual. Marcin, having said this, floor is yours. Please take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is a great pleasure and an honor to moderate such a great panel on such an important issue. I think that it is a great challenge to somehow discuss the future of universities within 1 hour and 20 minutes and among so many distinguished guests. So let me follow with a clear discipline because we will have not enough time to raise all of these questions and give many answers on the questions. That is why I divided the webinar into 3 sections, and each sections will be dedicated to one mission of the university: the teaching, instruction, the research, and the so-called third mission of the university. So we might call it as social responsibility of the university. I think that we will start with the teaching, which is mostly affected, I suppose, by the COVID-19 pandemics. And I will ask an introductory question and will ask every speaker to give a very brief 2 minutes critical point or hypothesis that we can then discuss in group of us and maybe add some additional questions. So the first question that is referring to the problem of teaching is that the COVID-19 pandemics changed unexpectedly and rapidly the approach towards teaching and instruction. And the traditional teaching methods, such as lectures that have been questioned for the last few years at least, within just few days, had to move to the internet and became virtual, not bonded with time and place. And my question is, how will the future of academic teaching look like in the new situation? Will we fully come back to the lecture halls when the pandemic ends? Or rather, we should prepare and expect a new normal at the universities, and what the new normal might mean for the university teaching. I would like to start with Professor Dobrochna Bach-Golecka.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. And my response to the teaching prognosis is firstly that I would like to positively evaluate what is happening now and to transfer those positive results and experiences to the new normal teaching. So my prognosis is that there would be a mixture of online classes and classes that are real lecture halls. So this mixture would be based on flexibility, and there would be two types of teaching: those who are based on normal lecture hall classes because social interrelations are important, and possibly there would be a choice for students to get a mixture of normal teaching and online teaching. Possibly what I would predict is also to develop two types of studies, one comprising of lecture halls teaching and online teaching, and the second one based solely on online teaching for those students who are far away from the university, who are working, who are feeling more convenient with online teaching solely. So this is my response as far as teaching is concerned. And as far as certain requirements concerning teaching in new normal, what I would say is important within the future of universities is connected not solely to passing of knowledge, but to the ability of developing within the students critical thinking, and to introduce them with certain soft values like self-examination, soft manners that would allow them to be responsible members of the society.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask for the same answer, Professor Roland Bernhard.
Yes, thanks very much. It's a big honor for me to be here. I'd like to share my experience from the perspective of a professor of a big department of a large university, namely the University of Vienna, the Department of History. And I want to report on a little bit what the challenges were that teaching staff at universities were facing due to the corona crisis after the lockdown in March 2019, and how so many teachers responded to these challenges in such creative ways and made, I think, the best they could out of the situation, and what I think this might mean for the future. In March 2019, I came to the University of Vienna as a visiting professor. Before that, I was 1.5 years visiting researcher at the University of Oxford, Department of Education. And in Oxford, we had comparatively small groups of students, but very, very big groups of research staff and teaching staff. There is a very elaborate system of personalized learning, and such small groups are not very difficult to transfer into online and virtual classrooms. At the University of Vienna, it was a different situation. I had my first lecture, which was Introduction in History Education. There were more than 300 students that had inscribed in this course. And I only had the first lecture in the lecture hall in March, and then COVID-19 struck, and the lockdown was a great shock. It was like completely new to us. And there was no experience in how to handle a lockdown like this. The universities closed, as did also the University of Vienna, in order to help halt the spread of the pandemic. So what did we do? How to teach the students? In Vienna, it was not about teaching small groups, offering tutoring, but it was like about our obligation to pass on knowledge to 300 or 400 or even 1,000 students. At that time, and it is very interesting to think back, most of us were familiar with Moodle, but we haven't heard about Collaborate or Jitsi or Zoom. and most of us didn't have any experiences in producing videos, which has changed so profoundly since then. Now, like, everybody knows these tools and everybody is working with these tools. The University of Vienna reacted very quickly and within days published on its homepage tutorials of how to use virtual classrooms, how to make like screencasts and videos. And our rector, Heinz Engel, addressed all the teaching staff of the university with a video, and he produced and led the way in this respect. And what happened then, I think, was very fascinating to me. There was a kind of collective striving and effort for really getting better in all these digital tools by many university teachers. Like, as far as I can tell from the history and the economic history department, some thought that everything will be over in May and that we can return to the lecture halls then, which proved to be wrong. But I think the great majority of the teachers adapted very quickly to the new situation. And I'm convinced that universities that view COVID-19 as like a temporary pop-up and revert completely to traditional ways of teaching when it's all over are very likely to fall behind. As Professor Bach, I also think that in the future, higher education will be based more on blended learning. Like, when we think on 10 years from now or 20 years into the future, we'll combine a mixture of in-person location-based programs. And I'm absolutely convinced it's very important to have direct interaction with students face-to-face, that students interact among them, the atmosphere at the university, the chat with other students. All this contributes to a real educational experience. However, this will be combined more and more with the flexibility of both, and I think synchronous and asynchronous virtual learning. And this will be the new normal at the university. It will be more normal than it is currently, because we are in a lockdown in Austria at the moment, but not as normal as before the pandemic.
Thank you very much. Now, His Magnificence Professor Engel.
Thank you. I can just continue from the side of the University of Vienna. Just give you a perspective about the size of the problem we had in March. We have 90,000 students, we have 10,000 employees, so this is 100,000 people right in the center of Vienna. So we had to close very fast because we were actually in the danger of being a super spreader, as one calls it now. So we had to close actually from one day to the other, just after 1 week of live teaching. Per semester, we have about 7,500 different courses. In May, we did about 50,000 online exams. So it's not only teaching, it's also exams, which is quite difficult because we still haven't figured out how to make exams in some sense just, not to induce teaching, how to control it in a reasonable way. That's still a major problem. And then we have hundreds of laboratory classes, which we had to close. Now we are partially closed, but we have the laboratories open. We have our own testing equipment, so we test everybody works in a lab, because not having a lab in chemistry or in biology means losing a semester for each student. But as Professor Bernhard also said, all that worked quite well. Usually at the big university, there's always some trouble, always some discontent. But I was positively surprised that the change to online teaching and also the common spirit was quite positive. It still is now. If the pandemic is longer, then maybe this may change. But I'm quite positive about this. Now, the University of Vienna is just 1 year younger than the University of Krakow, 1365, and University of Vienna survived the plague and all wars, and so I'm quite confident that we will survive this crisis, but in a very different way. The positive outlook of this pandemic, if there's any positive outlook, is that it accelerated a lot of processes were under work. We were quite advanced in some faculties, not in all of them, in digitalization, in flipped classroom, in using Moodle. But of course, it was a slow movement. And this was just accelerated a lot, and it's now, as Professor Bernhard mentioned, natural to everybody to use these tools. I mean, in the first week, we had to implement a lot of new software. We had to, I think, triple the number of servers, the internet capacity, but all that worked quite well. But if we want to come back in a different way after the pandemic, but we are still committed to be a presence university. And I think the most important thing at a university like this, opposed, especially at a very large university, we have actually, except medicine, which is now separated from us, all faculties which are thinkable, from Catholic theology to molecular biology, about 20 faculties. That's an asset, because students of different fields meet in the cafeteria, and that's the essence of the university, especially the first-year students. This semester, where we now have a moderate lockdown again, we tried especially to bring the first-year students back to the university, because it's also a personal experience. As Professor Bach said, we want to educate them as citizens, responsible citizens, not just through absorbing knowledge, but also through contacts to each other. So what will be after this crisis will be, of course, a changed university. Probably our largest lecture hall has about 800 seats. That was always stacked with people. I doubt if the transfer of knowledge or the teaching is much more effective in a large lecture hall like this than it can be now in a partly interactive way. So this will certainly vanish. We will come back sort of as a hybrid university, linking both sides, both advantages of presence university, but also like, partially hybrid or partially digital. My daughter studied, among other things, piano. And there it was always clear at the Music University of Vienna, when you go to the teacher, to the class, you are supposed to know the piece already, and then the teacher just corrects little things. And I think the future should be that students who come to a lecture have already absorbed basically the knowledge, and that the class, the interactive class then in presence, is mainly for polishing, for asking questions, for discussion. So there will be a lot of change, and this has been accelerated by the pandemic. But of course, I'm quite confident that this is a positive effect. It will also change personnel structure, because now the other big change we had is home office, like we are now. And also this will not just be reverted after the crisis. Everybody will be back in the offices and all teaching will be at the university. It will also be an internalization of teaching, of course, possible, because now we have a lot of external teachers also from other countries. They flew into Vienna each week. Now this is not necessary anymore. So a lot of changes, but a lot of them also positive changes, I expect. And the last thing, I don't expect that the global universities like Harvard or MIT might expand and conquer the world. There's always a place, and I think the most important place, for university which teach students also in person.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Professor Radwan.
Yeah, thank you. I think learning is a social experience, and this is not something that's going to change automatically. And also research and all the spillovers of research are like cluster phenomenon. So it requires a physical concentration. So I think those paradigms are not going to be changed by the pandemic. So in the post-COVID era, because I think the most interesting thoughts are the ones devoted to how the universities are going to change after the pandemic. The response is also very interesting. It is the matter of urgency of the instant response. But it is also, and I think it is even more interesting to look at pandemic as a trigger of a lasting change. So I think the underlying expectations probably will remain the same. And this is the saying that if you want to meet a future president of the United States, you should go to Yale or maybe Harvard, and because it emphasizes this physical encounter. So it is always the question of what you look for as a student, and I think this networking, this coming together, this elite building will and remain valid in the future as well. But this is just one thing. The other thing is the service that the university provides, offering degrees. So far, the default choice for many would be to go to the universities just nearby. Maybe not the nearest one, but somehow the circle of usual, like the places where we would go, for the most people would be limited. Of course, increasing number of people travel to other countries, but for many, still the choice is the local university. And since you are learning online, at the university is just 20 miles away, why shouldn't you do the same at the universities 1,000 miles away, if maybe the diploma is more prestigious? So I think for some, I don't know the magnitude of this, but I think for some universities, specifically for the smaller ones, less reputable, it is not something that is going to happen to the University of Vienna. But for some peripheral universities, for smaller universities, it might be, the temptation might be for many, if the taboo of learning online, because I think it is about breaking taboo. We are used to the university culture, and this is somehow broken. Today, people got accustomed to the fact that they can study online, and this is normal. And if you can do so at a university that offers you a better brand at the end, and if you study from home, so I think once the taboo is broken, so it might accelerate some process. It is not to say that all the universities will be wiped up and only the big brands will remain, but it will help the bigger brands. And I think some universities will stronger develop towards this, towards becoming big universities, because the marginal cost of offering distant tuition is still much lower. And I think some will sense that this is this new market once this taboo of normal university is somehow maybe not destroyed, but in a way weakened. And also, when I look at what might be positive, I think maybe this will give impulse for doing away with this outdated concept of pensum, which has been around for centuries, that every professor needs to teach so many hours. And I think somehow it de facto changes the mission of the university, but because my impression is that for some universities, the actual mission is to give the pensum, the teaching hours, for every professor that they employ, which of course might have a negative effect on education. I think we should start thinking of doing away of this, because why should we have, like now when all universities switch to online learning, so we have basically hundreds or thousands of professors worldwide teaching basically the same, right? Better or the quality might differ, but the idea is the same. So they produce the classes in the basic courses that they cover. And do we really need this? And I think we need more. Professor Roland Bernhard mentioned this before. I think this should give an incentive to move towards more personalized approach. So we do not need to have that many professors teaching the basic courses for hundreds of students, because at a very small marginal cost, they might be offered to thousands of students and just put online. Instead, what our gain would be, we should offer this human capital that we have left at the universities to more customized approach, so that we have more mentoring. What students do need in this information overkill, they need to have curriculum advisors. They need to have career advisors, what to select from. The world offers more and more, and people are getting lost in this knowledge overkill. So they need somebody to help them, to guide them through what to select, to plan their future career paths in a more conscious way. So I think this change might be triggered by this change. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Radwan. You actually gave 5 critical points, not 1 critical point. But now maybe it will be quite interesting to hear the Italian perspective. So Professor Luciano Sasso, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is a great pleasure for me to be here tonight in this high-level panel. Let me start saying that, so of course, this year has been tragic for many people. Many people passed away, many people suffered. It was even impossible to organize funerals in some countries like Italy. So I have to say that this is something that we feel very close to everyone who really suffered so much this year. Universities indeed actually learned several lessons, and I fully agree with many things already said. So I will try to be brief on some elements because I think they already were mentioned very clearly by other speakers before. I also was very well impressed by the reaction of professors in many universities, not only my university, Sapienza, but also other universities of the UNICA network, which I chair, which is an association at the moment of 53 universities based in Brussels. And this, I have to say, is another link between our countries, because the University of Vienna, University of Warsaw, and Sapienza are members of UNICA. So let me add this additional link. And so I was exposed to really a feedback, again, not only from Italy, but also from many other European countries in this COVID period. So the reaction, I think, was very good. Many people who never probably organized any activity online, really started to work very well and teach in March, April, so in a very good way. Of course, we have to remember, as Rector Engel said already, that we have to be careful about the discipline, because some disciplines probably can be taught online completely, but others no. Like not only, of course, the scientific ones, but even in the humanities, you cannot just do archaeology online or other disciplines. So I think it depends very much on the disciplines, and we really, I think, observed a loss in some, learning environments, again, in different disciplines. Of course, we have to consider that for students starting a university in a digital way is not the same. So this is another main issue, and that is why many universities paid attention to try to leave space to the students in the first or second year to attend the classes in person when possible, because we know that that is so important. Also, let me mention the digital divide. We observed that many students actually did not have access to high-speed internet, to good devices, computers, etc. Some families, during the lockdown in spring, they were in small apartments, maybe with 1 or 2 computers, and then the whole family, from the small kids to the parents, had to go online, in different activities. So that was really challenging for many families in our countries and beyond. And again, we have to be ready in the future to provide to everyone the possibility to do things online. Let me mention, it was already a little bit touched upon, but I want to go deeper on this topic of the virtual mobility. We have to say that this approach of teaching online opens, I would say, a new world of possibilities for our students, because if they listen to our lectures online, maybe in the same city, they actually can be exposed very easily to lectures from professors from all over the world. So actually we can design the international mobility in a different way, and not just having bilateral agreements like usually we have between different universities, but trying to open, to our students the possibility to attend courses from different universities at the same time in the same semester. And as you know, in this direction, the topic of micro-credentials is very hot at the moment in Europe. There is a lot of discussion because, of course, this kind of activity is also very much linked to the issue of recognition. And we know that recognition has been difficult in Erasmus in the last 30 years, and probably the recognition of individual courses, can be even more difficult. I mean, if we don't change a little bit certain approaches. So this, I think, is fascinating, the way in which, again, the new normal can be, online teaching when possible, and not only online teaching from professors from the same university, but also from, colleagues we collaborate with from all over the world. Let me also mention one political element, if I may, because unfortunately this, digital approach, this COVID period actually, had an impact also on the mobility of European citizens. I traveled this summer through different countries belonging to the Schengen space, and I found, borders again. It was not easy to travel between the countries anymore. And now to fly is more difficult, to travel is more difficult. So I think the Erasmus generation, as we call it, really benefited in the last few years of a very easy mobility between the European countries, and that was contributing very well to the European identity. And now, again, to travel is more difficult. So I think European Union in general, is going to face a challenge of trying to, again, go with the same speed towards, an integration. And then, so to conclude, I have to say I fully agree with also what Professor Engel said about, the acceleration. There's certain, let's say, innovation in pedagogies were already taking place before, but they were significantly accelerated by the COVID. So many, new technologies and new approaches, like, flipping the classroom. I mean, I fully agree with the idea that nowadays information is available, so we should ask our students to learn at home and then come to classes already after having studied the lecture, so that we can go directly to the Q&A session, to the issues of more difficult of the point. And this is, again, has been accelerated in a very significant way. So I think in the end, after this tragic period, the new normal will probably be better with, for education for universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In order to give anecdotal evidence, today in the morning, my student informed me that he's resigning from going for a students' exchange to Germany because of the COVID-19. So we now are facing the problem with the Erasmus exchanges and the whole idea of the making some semesters abroad. Thank you very much, Professor Luciano Sasso. Now the floor is for Professor Łukasz Sułkowski. And I would like to remind, try to put your hypothesis in 3 minutes, or at least not more than 5.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. Actually, I agree with the remark that universities survived for almost 1,000 years, so we will survive more, but we are in a group of quite conservative organizational cultures and strategies, and it's a kind of the shock to the system. I will claim, let's say, if I may put hypothesis, that it's a decade of acceleration in area of the not only education, but also in the area of internationalization and in the area of the management and governance of the universities. And actually change is quite fast. I can give you an example of e-learning in Poland, where we had quite strict approach of the legislator, of the accreditation agency, 50% as maximum. Of course, having an experience of the 100% emergency remote e-learning, we are getting to the totally new world. And actually, next regulations after post-COVID is in this moment 75% of the program done on the e-learning basis. And I agree with members of the panel. We are getting into the mode of the blended learning. So probably the teaching in the model of 100% emergency e-learning is not good, but probably the old model of teaching, where we have the classic lectures and the teaching in a large room with the non-active methods, can be in easy way, in some way replaced by e-learning activities. However, this is a matter of the quality of this teaching. All over the world, we are in mode of the process of teaching. Actually, here, Association of Polish Rectors made a kind of the review in what way we've done the 1 semester of the e-learning activities. Quite self-satisfied about the e-learning activities, but at the same point, I would like to raise several points of doubts. First of all, the large problem is the verification of the learning outcomes, because even if we provide quite passive type of the lectures with the use of, let's say, tools like Moodle, or even, let's say, more modern tools like platform of Blackboard, for example, we can say that the interaction is on a quite low level, and the verification of learning outcomes brings a lot of trouble. Of course, there is always an explanation that technical problems with verification of learning outcomes can be bypassed by some kind of moving to the creative tasks. not only based on the knowledge, checking of knowledge of the students, but on a quite puzzle solving. Yeah, but still, this is the big trouble. We can observe, according to the surveys in Poland, that both students but also academic teachers are tired because of the e-learning activities. And actually, I think in a short term, after COVID or post-COVID, it will be the backlash. People would like to see each other in the campus, and in a short-run model of the blended learning, probably only for the part of the higher education institutions will be something like the proper way. Yeah, vast majority of them in a short term will return to the campus, use the infrastructure, try to use the interaction between people because this is social activity. However, in a long run, I think that we learned a lesson. So blended learning, that it will be it will use the experience of the both teachers and students in a long run can take the its place as a part of the higher education. The big challenge also is the synchronic versus asynchronic e-learning activity. It wasn't mentioned here, but in the vast majority of the university, let's say 90%, it was mainly synchronic activity. Luckily, we have the disposal of the different platforms for this use, like we are on this type of the platform, or there are many of them, and university has this opportunity to make synchronic learning. However, high quality e-learning tools that can be used by the students in a proper time, not only as classes, it's a time and the process of the preparation. We've made a step towards this direction, but it's a long-term process, and it's quite challenging. Internationalization of students is strongly affected by COVID-19. Of course, it will be transition toward more mobility tools here, but from the other side, lack of the experience of the intercultural contacts, of the staying in the campus, staying in the different countries, it's a big loss. And last but not least, there is a problem with the quality management tools. When we switched in emergency remote education, because let's say we get a system programmed mainly for traditional tools. However, here the strong point is that, again, from the strategic perspective, for the long run, e-learning activities can have the tools that are more, let's say, data evidence, that we have the database of the classes, lectures, exercises, and we can make the check of that. So to sum up, we are going toward the digital university with the new IT tools like learning management systems, a new kind of the mobile tools, BIs to make the analysis of the quality of education. We are, let's say, in the middle of this revolution, and it's important to influence that we use the value for the good transition of the higher education institutions, taking into account diversification, different missions, from the 100% e-learning, vast majority blended learning, and the part of the university only small support of the e-learning activities. The mission, even in education, can be different, but still they need a strategic reflection and a strong support from the side of the academic community, consulting activities, innovative pedagogical tools. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much for such a broad perspective. And we've just heard 6 voices from the managers from Accademia, and the last voice will be the voice of an academic, but also a decision maker. So now Professor Dobrochna, the representative of the Ministry of Science and Higher Education, there's time for your points.
Thank you very much. Remote learning have three advantages. The first one is the possibility of recording the lecture. Listening to a lecture in a lecture hall, one can easily lose attention for a couple of minutes, and then it is difficult to follow the lecture. Listening at home, an online lecture, you can record it, you can rewind 2 minutes back, and you can listen again, you can easily follow it. You can even listen the whole lecture again if you like. The second advantage is that the lecturers can show with more details some specimens, some experiments, can show close-ups of the equipment, slow down motion, and so on. So the lectures could better illustrate the point of the lecture than in the lecture hall. The third advantage is that students will have a big choice of the lectures on a given topic from all the universities all over the world. So the local universities, they could arrange their curricula in such a way that they could suggest the students to listen to a chosen lecture from some university, and more time could be given by the lecturers, more attention could be given by the lecturers to preparing tutorials, interactive tutorials, as the previous speakers already mentioned, and to laboratory exercises, which are also important part of the teaching, especially in sciences. So, in the ministry, we put a lot of attention to increasing the competence of the teachers, of the lecturers, to increase the quality of lectures. Therefore, we welcome the opportunity of many online lectures because it creates a competition. So it is a good motivation for lecturers to increase the quality of the lectures, which we believe it is positive effect.
Okay, thank you very much. So to somehow sum up, I would say that you might see that the glass is half empty or half full. And if you see the half full glass, then you see that the COVID-19 brought new opportunities, and most of you mentioned the advantages that are connected with hybrid learning or blended learning or mixed learning. The different keywords were used by the speakers, but actually they were talking about the same idea of blended learning. But on the other hand, there is a problem of some students that might be left behind because of the digital exclusion that Professor Luciano Sasso mentioned, and the problem with the challenges, for especially provincial universities, that they may face in coming years because of the internationalization of the higher education in the time of its digitalization as well. So we are somehow exceeded the time that we, or I suppose for the first session, but so that is why we can move to the second one and somehow link the second and the third mission, so the research and the social mission. And I would like to ask about the research. So the COVID-19 has shown globally that the societies and politicians expect from the academia, from the researchers, from different academic fields, immediate answers, and very often didn't receive the immediate answers, and that undermined the social trust in research. We can have observed that during many anti-COVID streets protests, so in every country, so in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, also in Poland, the anti-pandemic protests. Moreover, the current publication system with long-lasting review procedures that last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, make the research either out of date or completely irrelevant in so fast-changing world. Thus, since the spring 2020, we have been witnessing the flood of working papers that were peer-reviewed not by official revisers, but by the whole scientific community. And not only by the scientific community, also but by ordinary people, by media, by some independent experts. And the question is, should we expect a revolution in the patterns of academic papers review, and how might the post-COVID research papers market look like? And now we can start in reverse order. So Professor Dobrochna, if you could share your brief opinions about the scientific papers market after the COVID-19.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we are used to the system of peer review, which is rather slow. It often takes 1 year before we finish the work and we publish the results. But if we look into the role of the publications, I mean, we can see that they are different roles. I mean, first of all, the publications is important for documenting our work and for dissemination. And this can be done with any server. So there is no problem today to put a paper online, to present the results immediately to all the world. The second role of the publication is the intellectual property assignment. I want to prove that I was the first who found this idea, who made this experiment, and so on. Again, for this, any server with an official date stamp is enough. So again, easy and automatically implemented. But finally, the third role of the publication is the evaluation of our work. I mean, many ministers all over the world, many universities, they evaluate the output of a scientist looking at the number of papers on the impact factor of the journals the article was published, and so on. And for that, we need a peer review, and nothing better was invented so far. So it is slow, but for this role, it doesn't need to be fast. So I believe that for this purpose, the peer review system will stay for us. I don't know if for another 1,000 years, but certainly for many years ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Professor Łukasz Sułkowski.
Thank you very much. Actually, I think that this COVID experience for humanity, it will be also the big change in meaning of the research and academic or science ethos. Let's say we have two approaches. Robert Merton kudos ethos, that is the community universal science that is openly criticized and exchanged. And on the opposite of that, we have a Johnsian place that is privatized, industrialized, with the copyrights, with being a kind of the market commodity, yeah, for exchange. And actually, I think that with the COVID experience, we have something in the middle. We can observe that from one side, there is the kind of the rapid race in between of the industrial pharmaceutical companies that are going on with drugs and vaccines. From the other side, the results are based or made the kind of the loop, kind of the feedback with the research that are published in an open science, in a digital, of course, digital way, and the access is very fast. And I think in meaning of the making the mission of science or research mission, it will be some kind of the crucial reflection that this is not so simple that we have the community universal model versus industry privatized commercial model. Second, I think that as in the area of the e-learning, there are much more challenges. In area of the science, at least in general, we can survive with a much larger access to e-learning, remote collaborative tools, of course, depending on the disciplines. There are disciplines like laboratories, where the laboratories are in not too many places all over the world, and the people must work together in this laboratory. But in general, if I may observe the model of the collaboration from my perspective, I mean social sciences, humanities, for example, I see that people are collaborating internationally, nationally, that they are publishing, and they can use in a more advanced way existing tools for let's say kind of the virtual working. And I think that we do not make such a question here, but it's worth to mention the management part of the university. When we are looking at the governance and management of the university, COVID should also bring kind of the revolutionary change. Yeah, it was mentioned that first of all, we learned a virtual way of the work. We know that it can be tiring. Yeah? We are doing that by, let's say, last 10 months or 9 months. We would like to have a much larger number of the direct contact and communication, but still we learn to use a tool, and it will stay with us. Also in the area of the management of the university, we've made a significant step towards the digital university. I mean, implementation of many ITS systems in both e-learning, in kind of the repositories, databases with publication, open access tools, monitoring tools, also quality of the education and the progress in meaning of the scientific achievements. So it's not only a learning process for the community in meaning of the academic staff and in meaning of the students as crucial stakeholders, but it's also a process of the learning for the management and for the administration of the higher education institutions, and it's a process of learning of using the virtual remote management and remote administration tools. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sulkowski. You mentioned about the role of cooperation in the digital era, and the question is whether the cooperation of researchers might serve as a production of open access papers, or the second mode, to treat the papers as a commodity. And what is your perspective, Professor Luciano Sasso? Where will we go in the future? Should we, or will we treat or perceive the academic papers such rather as a commodity, or rather as an open access for the whole society?
Thank you very much. This is a big question. It's difficult to reply in 2 minutes. So let me say, first of all, in general, as the impact of COVID on research, has been huge. Again, in some disciplines, probably even worse than education. I think it was really impossible to do research in some fields, in the STEM disciplines, but again, also in some fields in the humanities. Let me mention also one psychological issue, because some people, even if technically speaking you can do many things online, some people really suffer because of the isolation, because of the impossibility of going to certain places, workplaces, etc. So these are things now that we are still human beings, and sometimes we react in an unpredicted way. Let me also mention, in terms of international groups, physical mobility, of course, has been very difficult or impossible, and even in the new normal, probably the international physical mobility will be lower than before, and this probably again will be a loss for some international groups, because of course that was really a rich element of research, to be able to have a creative environment of people coming from different countries, etc. And going to this big topic of open access and open science, I have to say UNICA organized several events on this. One very recent in November, actually, that was in cooperation with the University of Warsaw, and was a very interesting webinar. Let me say in a few words, this topic has been debated now for several years. Of course, again, COVID accelerated also this discussion, because let's say in the society, even if you are online, a person who is not affiliated to an academic institution does not have access to all journals, published, of course, in the world. And many of them are not free. I mean, there are subscriptions paid by libraries. So if you are affiliated to a large university, very often you have access to the best journals in the world. If you are not affiliated to an institution, or if you are affiliated to a small institution, you may lose, again, a lot of information. So we debated for a long time, again, this topic. UNICA supported the so-called Plan S. I don't want to go now into details because in 2 minutes it is not possible to tackle this big subject. But in a few words, I think we should really go towards open access. The European Union is also pushing in that direction, and of course, publishers. If they actually, of course, publish their own journals, it is of course correct that they should have a profit, but sometimes it is known that this profit is probably too high. And on the other hand, publishing in open access allows everyone in the society to benefit from the publication. But still, of course, universities, on the other hand, they should provide funds to individual researchers, for instance, publishing in open access, to pay for the so-called publication fees, which again are the only way to support also the organizations publishing the article. So again, it is a complex topic, but I think open access should be the solution in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Professor Sarso mentioned the problem of reduction in mobility of researchers, and that might be a problem for the external office of Polish Academy of Sciences. And Professor Radwan, have you observed such a problem in the last months with the limited mobility of researchers?
Well, it is not just limited, it is almost down to zero. Our facility embraces also housing for incoming scholars that come for conferences, research, exchanges, studies, and so on. And, well, all those rooms, almost all, are empty. So this obviously for now, yes. But coming back to the question, to this round of questions, I fully agree with Mr. Dobrochna said before. If you look at publications, then you ask yourself, what is the purpose? And circulation, certification, evaluation, and who was the first. So this is basically exhaustive list of purposes. And I think even pre-pandemic, what we have seen around for a couple of years now, peer-reviewed journals that take a long time is one thing. But oftentimes, which became almost normal, people would upload their papers, like the pre-published versions, which in most cases are quite almost identical with the final version. They put them on Research Edu, Accademia, ResearchGate, Accademia Edu, and other dissemination networks. So it is so important that the papers really circulate. I am not expert in bibliography, but I think we should also learn how to better count the impact through citations. And it is also happening right now. You can see how many downloads you had from those research repositories, also how many citations you had. So I think it is something that started long before COVID. And one more aspect, which is also what you, Marcin, mentioned in your question, the credibility of academia, what the society expects us as scholars to do, what we are supposed to deliver. I think it is a very complex question, and it is a part of a broader question of the challenges of the post-truth era. We are living in a time where elites are being challenged, where credibility of politicians, elites is being questioned. And since scholars are perceived as a part of elites, we suffer. So we are living in the times where we do not only have a competition between different value propositions, but we also have a competition between different narratives and, in fact, different truths. And there is no answer to this. And I think no one has a proper answer to the questions that the rise of social media poses and the decline of the mainstream media poses. And I think the problem of credibility of academia is just a part of this. And this is somehow, I don't know, a paradox. I think now of a cartoon. There's a cartoon, a man is sitting on a couch, just watching television and drinking beer. And the news is coming up saying the scientists proved wrong that the world is older than they initially supposed by 500 million years. And the man drinking beers comments, such an idiots they are, those scientists, right? So this is one of the, like it portrays in a way the problems that we have, and I think even today. But on the other side, well, academic titles still have the value. With the proliferation of higher education, well, I could frame this maybe in a drastic way. Everybody knows some fool who has academic degrees, or at least finished university, graduated from the university. So I think it is a very complex problem, the credibility, the long-term credibility of the academia. But one thing, maybe a positive one, the academia, the universities long lost its virtual monopoly on creating knowledge. Today we have think tanks, and Marcin, you combine very well working for the university with working for the think tank. So think tank produce knowledge. Also, R&D centers produce knowledge. So the universities have double problem. On the one side, they lost their monopoly of creating knowledge, and the other side, living in this cacophony of information with a decline of mainstream and the rise of social media, there is a competition of truths. And this is a phenomenon that is much broader than the problem of academia, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Radovan touched upon a very important issue, the credibility of academia. And I think now I would like to ask Professor Engel, as a rector of the University of Vienna, to ask the question about how do you see the credibility of academia, how it might be improved in the society?
Yeah. Well, I just give you some experiences from the pandemic. First, let me mention that the current Austrian science minister was my former vice rector. So I'm, of course, in quite a close contact to politics. Before I start my main statement, I would like to say that also in research, something was accelerated a lot by the crisis, namely interdisciplinarity. We talked a lot at the University of Vienna about the chances of research across faculties, and we have some funding schemes. But during the crisis, it was accelerated just hugely. For instance, collaboration between microbiologists, psychologists, and social scientists in joint projects. So what did University of Vienna do? First of all, one of our ERC prize winners in microbiology developed a new version of a PCR test, which was then used in testing across the board schools in Austria and also universities, which had a big public impact. So this increased a lot in the public and in the media and in politics, the consideration that science was doing something for society and that science was important, especially basic science. But there was also the other side, especially in modeling the crisis, mathematical modeling, which is quite a difficult thing. There were different groups in different universities in Austria and even at the same university who advised different politicians with vastly different predictions of how the crisis might, or how the pandemic might develop. Of course, they all had their models. This is hard to model. There's the SII, whatever, details don't matter. But they use their perceived credibility as scientists to claim that what they say it was true, and others said exactly the opposite. And of course, in such a crisis where there's exponential growth, you cannot model precisely what will happen in 3-4 days, especially have no data. But there were several politicians who used different groups of advisors and used their findings, under quotation marks, also politically, and also the media, there were media on one side, media on the other side, and this created a very bad impression about science, especially, I must say, about mathematics. The only positive, I think our chancellor once said, or somebody in the government, a positive effect of the pandemic is that now everybody understands what an exponential function is. But aside from that, there were a lot of conflicting statements. And as scientists, we are used to different opinions, but these are then actually settled on a scientific basis and not just by a public discussion. So I think what we need now is to restore trust in science, and this can only be done by, again, slowing the publication process. A publication in a newspaper is not a publication. So we have to go back quite fast to a reasonable peer review procedure. And of course, peer review has to be faster. And open access is important. But in my country, I think it's quite important to restore trust. There was the second question. I think this was point number 3, how this will change the research agenda of university. Of course, it has already changed our own research agenda by the crisis. We have now come closer to the medical university, which was until a few years part of the university, and also to the veterinary medicine university by launching joint programs in what one could call One Health. So we have changed our direction in some aspects already. Also in social sciences and psychology made a lot of well-received public statements and surveys in this crisis. But we do this in an autonomous way. We don't think in an Austrian system of quite autonomous universities, we should be told by politics or by the public in which direction research at the university should develop, but we should do this ourselves, and we are doing it already. I don't hear. Yeah, now it's working again.
No, okay. Sorry. Even in Poland in the recent days, we have seen 3 models, epidemic models, that were distributed or produced in 3 different academic centers that are advising to the Ministry of Health. And those 3 models are giving totally different, results. So actually, the problem is now that there were conflicts, there were arguments between the scientists, between the researchers, but now they become public, and everybody in the media can see that there are some conflicts between them. And how do you think this mediatization or publicity of the research will change the research mission of the university? That is a question to the Professor Bernhard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and thanks very much. I think what you just mentioned, that there are different outcomes of research papers, I think is a very normal process. We know in research that in many cases there is not just one perspective on an issue, and so there are some kind of different perspective, and now this might have gone very strongly into the public. But to the question you asked at the beginning, I think that when we are talking about research papers, perhaps the future will also bring more and more research videos. Like a YouTube channel makes it possible to publish your ideas like immediately, which also has big problems. Like we are already, like Professor Engel said, there must be a very good peer review, but the peer review processes often take a long time until they are finished, a year or even more. The power of video is that you can immediately share your ideas or results. And I think that there lies a potential which is currently only being discovered and which might in the future like change and accelerate the way we exchange ideas. I don't know how this might work exactly. Of course, there has to be a quality insurance in form of peer review, but we will see. Like not long ago, Accademia Edu, which was already mentioned, a famous platform on which researchers can publish their articles and books, and many preprints are also published there, introduced a new section, and you can now load up videos up to 5 gigabytes. And I just checked before the webinar. It's possible to upload course lectures, research summaries, conference presentations, or just video recordings. And I think this indicates that also with respect to publishing research, videos might play an increasingly bigger role. I'm also the editor of a journal, which is called the History Education Research Journal, and it's based at the University College London Institute of Education Press. It's an open access journal, and in one meeting it was discussed, like informally, not very officially, but to have authors of an accepted paper videotape a presentation about the topic, so that next to the paper there is also published a comment by the author, which can then be shared in social networks and in this way reach more people. I think that this might be an interesting option to spread scientific results farther, because and I think we have dealt a few times on the topic of fake news and conspiracy theories. There was a science publication in 2018, The Spread of True and False News Online by Vosogny et al., and it indicated that falsehood diffuses significantly farther, faster, deeper, and more broadly than the truth in all the categories in information. I just quoted this from this article, and that's why I think in times of fake news and when it comes to building trust in society, it's to be welcomed that we engage more in sharing sound knowledge, also in ways that reaches the world outside academic environments. This might contribute also. I think that we will talk about the third mission in the third question, but this might contribute to carry out the third mission of the universities, strengthening the dialogue among university and society.
Thank you very much. I've just imagined a section for the research videos on the YouTube, that you have the research YouTube for the whole world. So that sounds quite imaginative. Thank you very much for that perspective. And the last speaker in the second session will be Professor Dobrochna Bach-Golecka.
Yes. So I would like to divide the question concerning research papers on as far as the topic is concerned, and to divide them according to the urgency of the matter. So, for instance, within the topic of pandemics, within certain healthcare issues, judicial, legal, and political analysis, I think that the requirements of a speed transfer of opinion may be visible, but with the danger of science being somehow mass media transferred. As for the ordinary working papers, I would like to agree with what Professor Dobrochna and Engl has said concerning the ordinary peer review, but with this requirement of acceleration as far as the review process is concerned. And for the social responsibility of the university, I would like to mention the activities that were performed by the University of Warsaw. Once again, similar to the process in Vienna of establishing links with University of Warsaw, with the Medical University of Warsaw, once being a part of our mother university. But we have engaged in the process of genomic tests and also in COVID tests as a university, performing those services for the society. And what I would think of a future of university as far as the social responsibility is concerned, I would be of opinion that it is the task of a university to stand on guard of the autonomy of research. And this autonomy, I think, is partly in danger not solely from mass media, but also from public administration authorities and the reforms that try to categorize science and to stick the scientists into specific categories of knowledge, which is visible in France, for instance, but somehow also in Poland too, as far as the review process is concerned. And I'm very firmly believing in the autonomy of scholars and the social responsibility that enables us to choose those topics, those subjects of research which are important for the society. And I would like to thank Professor Sasso for the remarks concerning the human face of our functioning in the pandemics, and those remarks that puts our attention to human beings. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for combining those two questions on research and the third mission already. So for the end of the debate, I have last question, and I don't want to indicate anyone, so feel free to share your opinions. Historically, the university was experiencing its autonomy, and now we have a problem with the trust in many different public institutions. And do you think in many countries, so the trust in political elites is shrinking, trust in churches is shrinking, the trust to the traditional institutions is shrinking? And do you think that the university might become an institution of public trust of the last resort? How do you think what will be the place of academia, of universities in the social life within the next decade or 30 years up to 2050? As I said, I don't want to indicate anyone, so feel free to speak.
Okay, if I may, just a small remark.
Yes, Professor Tukowski.
Let's say, I think kind of the general mega trend, not caused but a bit catalyzed also by COVID crisis, is the diversification of the types of the universities. If we are saying about the old waves, let's say medieval wave of the university, or Humboldtian university, or a discussion about the post-Humboldtian university, now we can say this is the so diversified type of the institution, going out from the comprehensive old universities like Vienna or Jagiellonian, by the universities that are specialized, by the universities that are for-profit, not for-profit. So I think this diversification in some way impact the level of the trust. If we are ready to keep the academic ethos of the professors, academic teachers, in some way we can crystallize and keep level of the public trust. If the profession of the academic teachers, professors, scientists will diversify in such a way as type of the institutions that are so strongly diversified, I would like to put the hypothesis that we've been in trouble, because part of the private for-profit universities can be treated just like the, let's say, production of the degrees and knowledge that is sold on the labor market, which can be opposite to the public university and the mission to get a more critical reflect approach said here about the democracy and citizenship. So let's say it's a kind of the mission of the keeping the academic ethos and ethos of the university. Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing the perspective of university and the democracy. And now Professor Engel asked for a voice.
Difficult question, of course. Just 3 hours ago, I was in a similar discussion at Columbia University with the Secretary General of the United Nations. And the topic there was sustainable development, climate change, and things like that. And I think in the long run, or you said until 2050, the only chance for a society is that academia but in international networks, not just on a local national level, assumes its responsibility in such big questions. Climate change, things like that cannot be judged without science. And there are opinions, there are people who think that this is all a fake, but scientific evidence is most important there. But no single university in its own country can defend these things, but there need to be international networks like UNICA, like other networks in the European Union internationally. So no matter what kind of problems of credibility we might have had in the short term, and I mentioned some of them, I think, and also politics understands that universities, and especially basic research which is not directed at an aim which has to be reached in 6 months, is quite important also for a good development of the society. And that needs, of course, a certain degree of autonomy. But autonomy always comes with responsibility. It comes with quality control on the individual level with peer review, but also with, you mentioned, I think in Poland there was sort of an audit of the university system. At the University of Vienna, we will have an audit by international peers of our whole quality system in the next 2 years. So this is part of autonomy and responsibility. But it's the only chance for the future.
Thank you very much. Now, Professor Bernhard. And then Professor Sasso.
Okay, I want you to dive deeper in something what has just been mentioned. When more education is delivered by IT or in online and distance teaching methods and not on traditional campus, I think we can also expect that technology companies will, in the long run, enter the market. They might start, I don't know, like partnerships with universities, with strong brands, and perhaps sometimes there will be like the University of San Francisco powered by Google or Facebook. I really suppose that major tech companies may enter the market of education, and they also have artificial intelligence tools. They know what people are interested in, and they might be able to offer tailor-made suggestions of content and courses. And I think that might be a threat. And I am very interested also to hear like what other members of the panels think about this in this respect.
Thank you very much. Now, Professor Sasso.
Thank you. Just a very quick reaction to what Professor Bernhard just said. I think the competition is already there. I mean, a few weeks ago, I read an article about a Google degree. So, I mean, these actors are already there. And that is why, I mean, I agree with what Rector Engel said before. I mean, universities have been surviving after a major crisis. I mean, we have Arab universities, more than 1,000 years old. And of course in Europe, Bologna, etc. So we will. I'm optimistic we will survive. But Darwin was saying, is the species which is able to adapt, in the best way that will survive. So we have to change. And some actors already providing education are already there. So we have to consider that. And let me also follow up to what Professor Engel said about the SDGs in general. My impression is that before COVID, our students in Europe were focusing mainly on the number 13, climate change, which of course is a very important issue, extremely important, but is not the only one. The SDGs are 17. And actually, we know, if I may quote Schopenhauer, health is not everything, but without health, everything is nothing. And then this is what happened with the COVID crisis. The impact was huge on all aspects of our society. So I think, the responsibility of universities is to deal with all aspects of the SDGs and also to try to make the planet, in general, a better place. Because otherwise, if we don't solve the problems now, today, in a global way, sooner or later, they come to us. And so we have to be ready. So thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other submissions?
If I can add one point to this discussion, I mean, if the universities want to regain the trust, I mean, they should really respond to the challenges the society is facing. If they stay in the silo of the domain and discipline, just producing papers and titles, they will not regain trust, certainly. So in the ministry, we have just finished preparing a national science policy, an important document which will be released to public consultations in a couple of days. And perhaps this debate is the first place when I can announce this. Preparing this document from the very beginning, we gave up a disciplinary approach. I mean, discussing which discipline is more important than other academic exercise. So we decided to list the challenges we are facing in the world, in Europe, in Poland, and then we listed priorities which the government and especially Minister responsible for science should take to enable universities and the institutes to make a research in response to those challenges. So multidisciplinary approach in response to the challenges. I think this is the way to regain the trust of the universities.
Okay, and Professor Radwan was raising his hand.
Just very briefly, I remember once I read an interview with a Dominican priest, and he told a story. It is a funny thing when you go to the bank to open an account, and there you have to fill in the form when your firm was established, and they filled in 1222, I think it was the year when the Dominicans in Poland were established. And we are talking about innovation, universities as the ones who generate knowledge, but the business model of universities and the church, those are the two institutions that pursue the same, so to speak, business model over centuries that haven't really changed that much. Everything has changed around. So I think we cannot escape the question how the universities will change and whether we can defend our very sense of existence. And for this, I think we should ask ourselves, what are the universities for? And I think we already discussed networking, coming together, certification, and signaling. I think it will remain important thing. Because it is simply the market needs it, everybody needs it, that you have a certain certification system that tells you that the person that goes on the market can signal the qualifications. And I think it will be not very easy to substitute this. But on the other side, I think with the advancements of science, this is maybe a little bit different perspective. But since there is increasing what the science tells us, then we end up with a conflict between the freedom and what the science tells us is good for us. Soon we will have maybe wearables when it comes to diagnostics, medicine, and so on. So the question will soon be, what is the border between what is our personal freedom of every individual and what the science dictates us as something that is good for us. And I think this is maybe a little bit different perspective, but sooner or later we will be confronting this dilemma quite seriously. Thank you.
Okay. And now time for last interventions, Professor Engl.
No, I just wanted to react to a little bit to what the minister just said. I don't think that universities have to regain trust. And I don't think we are in a silo. And that you can just judge, of course, the Austrian and German universities. Of course, in this crisis, there has been some events that were not proper by scientists at universities because they were misused by the press and somehow also by part of politics. But in general, I think universities enjoy a lot of trust. Rightly so, and are not in a silo. I mean, we developed at the University of Vienna a third mission strategy since several years, and we have a lot of links to society. Nobody knew that a corona crisis would be coming, but based on our really great scientists in microbiology and molecular biology, we immediately developed a huge testing procedure. Nobody had expected that just this would come. Nobody knows what the next crisis will be. Everybody knows that health is important and the SDGs are important. Universities are certainly prepared for it. And we do this in dialogue with politics, but we don't need to be told by politics. So I think universities can be proud of what they are and always change and recognize also errors they made. But I think basically universities are a model which is successful and which will still be successful.
Okay. Thank you very much for all your answers, for all your perspectives. I think that we've heard during the last 90 minutes a lot of ideas. I think that's everybody who was watching this webinar found something interesting for him or herself. I think that we mentioned so many issues such as networking, the multidisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity, the problem of the video research, and many other issues. So thank you very much for your time. I was asked by the organizers, whom I also would like to thank for organizing this and collecting us during this time. I was asked to inform you and invite for another webinars organized by the Polish Academy of Sciences and the Scientific Center in Vienna. On Friday, there will be organized a webinar on the hate speech in political campaigns. And as I said, it will take place on Friday, the 4th December at 5 p.m. One more time, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your insights. I wish you a good evening and good luck in all of your academic obligations. Thank you very much, and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Ciao.